Friends, thank you for joining us today. This is going to be George Garland's program. George is our newest board member, but has a very long career with the Environmental Protection Agency and for the World Health Organization. And he served as the executive director for national membership for the United Nations Association, US, starting in 2008, and then as executive director of the World Energy Forum. He now serves as president of HEART Board in Haiti and continues to volunteer for the UNA. And George is speaking today on the US Commission on Religious Freedom. George Garland, welcome.
Why, thank you, John. I'm going to start with a story about when I was executive director of the National Capital Area United Nations Association back around the year 2000 is when I started that after I retired from EPA. And we would have events at embassies. And we had one at the Chinese Embassy on Connecticut Avenue. And the Falun Gong had a settlement in a small park just outside the embassy, which I'm sure was a little bit of a nuisance for the embassy. But the agenda was to have a cultural event and then a reception where everyone got to meet the ambassador, followed by a wonderful buffet that they were treating us to. It was a wonderful, wonderful event. And it turns out that one of our members was a Falun Gong. And he introduced himself to the ambassador. And the deputy said, should I do something about this? And the ambassador said, as long as he doesn't make any trouble, it's okay. So when it got to the time to go through the wonderful food line, I was accosted by the deputy who wanted me for an urgent matter. And it turns out that another member was very proud of the fact that we had a Falun Gong there. And when he introduced himself and this Falun Gong person to the deputy, he made a big deal about that. That was going too far. So I was invited to throw the guy out. And for the next 15 minutes or so, I negotiated whether this man would stay or go. And eventually, actually, toward the end of the event anyway, I agreed to escort the man out with one of the sort of local constabulary that the embassy had. And so we walked the guy to the door. He agreed to leave finally because it was almost over. And the soldier who took me to the door said, you understand that China is a very big country and we have lots of people and we can't afford to have trouble in the country. And Falun Gong could be trouble. So we have to keep them under wraps. And that goes to one of the main charges against people that you'll hear about, and that is public discord. Ever so many countries like have rules against public discord, and they are using that to put people in prison. And unfortunately, doing spiritual practices is considered public discord in some situations. So I'm going to tell you about a resource where you can see what's going on around the world in terms of governments that are interfering with religious freedom. For Unitarians, I summarize that by saying everybody matters and everything's connected. And this is an example where the government says some things don't matter and some people are not connected. Um, so the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom was established by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, and it was later amended by the Frank R. Wolf International Religious Freedom Act of 2016. And you can learn about this at uscirf.gov. That's uscirf.gov. And they have annual reports. The 24 report, which covers 23, is now out. And it is an extensive report with lots of facts and figures, which they can do because they are funded by the federal government. The commission has offices in Washington, D.C. at 732 North Capitol Street Northwest, Suite 714, zip code 20401. And there are 9 commissioners that are chaired by Abraham Cooper and a professional staff of 17, headed by Executive Director Aaron Singh Chinook. And they go around the world seeing what's happening. So we have these eyes working for us that make reports on what governments are up to in terms of challenging religious freedom. So the commission makes recommendations to the U.S. Department of State for their listing of countries of particular concern and their listing of a special watch list. The annual report documented 17 countries of particular concern and 11 countries for the special watch list and 7 another category, entities of particular concern. And interestingly enough, the State Department does not accept all of the recommendations of the commission. They accepted 12, but did not accept 5. They were Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, India, Nigeria, and Vietnam. And I'm making this up, but I would argue that sometimes economics or other considerations trump religious freedom. So they have more of an interest in economic development, say in better relations, economic relations with Vietnam, than worrying about Vietnam's treatment of citizens. The entities of special concern are people like Al Shabaab, Boko Haram, ISIS of the Sahel, the Taliban, several other ISIS-related organizations. So they also get a mention in the annual report. And but the State Department also does what they call exemptions. So waivers go to Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, which are on the particular concern list, but because of other considerations, they're exempted from having to be restricted in what they can do with, for example, money they get from the US government for buying arms. So the commission makes recommendations to Congress, and they encourage Congress to send delegations to these countries to talk to them about religious freedom and encourage them to loosen up their practices. The issue of public discord is quite the broad weapon that they use to try to keep people in line. The countries that are on the watch list include Burma, China, Cuba, Eritrea, Iran, Nicaragua, North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. So of those, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan get waivers. And they don't have to worry about being clunked on the head when it comes time to dole out US money. During 2022, the US Commission on International Religious Freedom issued 33 reports, held 8 hearings, and produced 43 podcasts. So they are quite active, and their 17 professional staff are quite productive in reporting on what they find. So there. Any questions?
Betsy?
First, I'll just mention that when you're back from your computer, I have trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You can just
Oh,
try to stay forward when you can. I did have a question.
Yeah.
So are the countries where this is public discord, is that generally because they have an established religion for that country and they don't want anybody to vary from that?
It's that, but plus they find that the religious groups can be critical of what the government is doing. So if the government is doing something that violates human rights and they speak up about it, they're considered bad guys.
Mm.
But of course, in India, where Hindutva or the efforts to promote Hinduism are prevalent, being an Islamic person can be a problem. And I just want to share a little bit, going back to what John did last time with spiritual practices. I was in India for 4 years with the World Health Organization's regional office for Southeast Asia, promotion of environmental health. I was there for chemical safety primarily in India, Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, and Indonesia. So when we would have an office picnic, when you have Hindus and Jews and Muslims and Jains, it's safe to have rice and dal. And I was thinking that food practices are another dimension that goes into spiritual practice.
That's true. Esther, you had your hand up.
Okay.
Yes, the example of Falun Gong. What exactly was the problem, or how do you see the problem with them?
The Falun Gong were holding up picket signs saying that
Sorry, holding up what?
On Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C., the Falun
Signs.
Gong that were camped out on that little strip of park in front of the Chinese embassy were holding up picket signs saying the Chinese government was unfair to Falun Gong. Now, the Chinese government saw them as a possible threat because they were becoming very popular. And when there's a political, so they did not distinguish between a religious movement and a political movement, as far as I can tell. And they saw them as a threat because they were a rival power to the Communist Party, potentially.
Well, it is similar to what is a problem with Christians in China in that case.
Yes. And of course, China has issues with Tibet as well.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, George, would you agree that there are regimes like China where just religion in general is suspect? And then you have a country like Russia at this point where there is a favored religion, and that's, highly accepted, but other religions are very suspect, which would also be true in some Islamic countries, and it seems in India at this point, if that the Muslims are treated as suspect on the face of it.
On the face of it, yes.
So you have these variations of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Yeah, as you may know, in India recently, there was a Hindu temple created, and the the president went there and was very prominent in dedicating it. That goes to the Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid issue, which goes back about 800 years, 400 years of the Great Mughals and 400 years of the British. And the Indian population remembers it like it was yesterday, when the first Great Mughal came in and tore down a mosque, I'm sorry, a Hindu temple, and put up the Babri Mosque, a mosque to Babar. That was an event that they've been trying to correct for 800 years, and they finally tore down the mosque and put up their own Hindu temple on the same site. It goes to how long a memory, a cultural memory folks in India have. And it goes to their, what shall I say, the popular enthusiasm for promoting the Hindu religion and putting down Islam.
Yeah, I got in trouble when I was in Spain, and we were visiting a great church there that was built over a mosque, and so much of the architecture actually was Muslim, and beautiful architecture that they certainly wanted highlighted. But there was a wall there that was where toward Mecca and was uh, uh, a place for prayer, and evidently a group of Muslims had at one point bowed down their face to the floor there and gotten into trouble. Well, I decided to bring out the Muslim part of my nature and got on the floor, but when I was doing it, I dropped my cane at that point, and it made a big rattle, and so that caused quite a disturbance for a few minutes. But they decided I was just an old guy that had fallen down rather than a Muslim, I think. So the tour leader quickly finessed it. So, but so those are real. And I mean, in South America, certainly, say in Peru, when I visited, there are places that were Incan sites and then were taken over by Christian churches, and they built right over the great architecture of the Incans. So it's all over the world, I think it's fair to say.
I was struck with my experience in Haiti, where many of the, I guess all of the little tuk-tuks that drive people around have Christian sayings on them. So you would think that it's a very Christian country. And I had a student intern who did research there on how to disseminate information about psychology. And she came to know that if you want to get information out in Haiti, you must go to the voodoo priests, because everybody goes to the voodoo priests. So it may on the face of it look like a Christian country, but the deep roots are with voodoo. Anyway, it's just,
Esther,
mean-
you have your hand up again.
No, I forgot to take it down. I can't see the top of the picture, so I forgot it. It's covered. Every face is covered here.
Oh,
George, I have a question.
good.
Um, 10 years ago, I contacted the commission that you were telling us about. I don't exactly remember, but I couldn't get a reply. We were having trouble as we were trying to protect Hawaiian worshipers, and it has broken out recently. A millionaire's housing development has, I'm going to say, occupied. They've finessed the state, and they've taken over an archaeological site that contains a gigantic Hawaiian healing temple that was restored. And the name of it is Kani Aki, and Hawaiians worship there now. But they can't now because the homeowners association of the millionaires, every property there is over $5 million. They have put a fence around it, and they maintain security and threaten arrest to anyone that comes there. Now, I have snuck in there with Glenn Keela, the actual Hawaiian priest who is supposed to take care of that temple, but they're trying to organize. It looks like it's ecotourists that are actually helping, and they have been troublemakers in the past, desecrating sacred sites, but it looks like we're going to have to sleep with them as soon as I get back in 3 weeks. And thank you for reminding me to contact this commission again and see if they will say anything about persecution of religious freedom in America.
I kind of, excuse me, I kind of doubt it. Their
I do too.
calls were international, but I hear you.
Now, Hawaiians do claim that the 1948 declarations that the United States made to the UN are totally illegal, and that it is an occupation of an independent and neutral nation, the Kingdom of Hawaii. So under that pretext, maybe they might take a look at religious persecution in the Kingdom of Hawaii.
It's worth a try.
It is.
You might do better with the UN Commission on Human Rights. We in our Southern New York division of UNA USA did a report to them about violations in the United States, and they take it seriously. And the State Department takes it seriously and passes it on, but looks at it carefully before they send it. So that might be another avenue.
Thank you. That might be a better one.
Yeah, and there's a gentleman whose name I don't remember, but I'll send you an email about him. He does a lot of work with the UN High Commission on human rights, and is quite an active person, and he's from Hawaii.
Mm.
That will be an excellent connection. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm working right now trying to get a Oneida Indigenous American involved with us, IARF, he is supposedly the liaison for Indigenous Americans for the UN, but I don't know. I won't go any further with the negotiations, but there are a number of violations that they are concerned about in the area of religious freedom and practice.
Okay.
I want to be sure that others who are here that have a question or a comment have a chance to speak up. Janice or John Gubbings or Karen.
I don't have anything I was here earlier with that. John was on the black screen. I had a link that you sent out today that didn't work.
Oh,
It took me a while to get it going.
oh,
But I did hear George's presentation,
oh, good, good.
and
That's the main thing.
I liked it.
Thank you.
Very informative. Intend to follow up some more. It seems to me I saw at one point that in doing some research on it that they actually had meetings that the public could attend. You just had to sign up in
Yes.
advance.
That's right. That's right.
And I tried to do that and didn't get a response. I didn't stick with it and try it again, or try to.
Right.
ask
Last year
why.
they held 8 hearings, but I think, so these hearings, I'm not sure whether they're around the country or in DC, but on their website, you can probably see when the hearings are coming up, I'm just saying. And that's uscirf.gov.
George, this is Janice. I'm sort of intrigued by what you were saying about the role of, if I understood correctly, the role of breaking bread, eating together in terms of building international or global community. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yes, we would have events for the WHO office in Delhi. And people who were there were from a whole variety of religions. And so each religion had its own prohibitions. So the Hindus prohibited beef, the Islamic folks prohibited pork, and the Jains prohibited just about everything. So it was safe to have, of course, naan, as you point out, and rice and beans was pretty much safe. But if you wanted to get along with folks, you had to take cognizance of their religious preferences in terms of food. I wanted to, but in terms of food, there's another story. One of the doctors at WHO was from Burma, and he and his wife wanted to go to Sri Lanka. He wanted to be the resident representative in Sri Lanka. So his wife explained to me that she was going to go to Dr. Coco, who was also Burmese, and ran the office, and explained to him that she wanted to go to Sri Lanka so that she could make merit by feeding the Buddhist monks. And she couldn't do that in India.
Wow.
You mean that was not permitted, or they just weren't, they weren't
They just weren't there.
never, yeah.
There wasn't the opportunity, but of course, in Sri Lanka, Buddhism is the main religion.
Wow.
Oh, well, of course, there are big fights about that too, never mind.
Yeah, the Sri Lankan population is you know, there's a significant group are Hindu and a significant group are Buddhist. But
So who was talking about Haiti?
I was.
Okay, so because when you said that about the Christian sayings, but the voodoo, so I knew I knew that people in Haiti and some other places, they practice both Haiti's primarily Catholics. They practice both Catholicism and voodoo, but when I looked it up here, it says voodoo is a religion that combines the Yoruba religion of enslaved Africans with Catholicism. So actually voodoo incorporates a lot of the Catholic, religion into their beliefs. So they're not really two religions. They're a syncretism of
They get along real
two
well.
different,
I'll give
yeah.
you an
So,
example.
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right near my school, there were some street gangs that were fighting, shooting each other. And about 2 doors down from us is the guy who runs the water treatment company. And he is also a big player in, if you'll pardon the expression, organized or disorganized crime in Haiti. So he called a meeting in the Catholic Church, and a prominent voodoo priest was there. That voodoo priest has a child in our school, and the head of the water treatment facility said to the two warring factions, "If you don't stop, I will kill you."
hmm,
And they stopped.
Wow. Oh.
But there was the voodoo priest and the Catholic Church all together to meet with the gangs and try to get them to behave a little better.
this it's bringing to my mind something that I brought up when I was talking last month, and that is that I think this business of cultural appropriation is very complicated in terms of religion, because obviously the whole nature of culture is appropriation. And so, if you're speaking English and you're from a country where English isn't the native language or the predominant language, then you're culturally appropriating English, I guess you could say, couldn't you? And so, where is appropriation appropriate or inappropriate? And I think that's very complicated. I think some of the indigenous groups are sort of on the one side saying this is only ours and we really can't share it. And at the same time, I believe probably to a person, they're involved with sharing traditions, cultural traditions that are not their native tradition, and in fact dependent upon them. So I think probably all religious people are culturally appropriating from other religions. Very, very few people started with what they have now in the 21st century. We're all combinations, all mixtures, I would argue. And I mean, I'm putting this up as something that certainly other people could say, no, I think you're wrong. That's fine. That's why we're here talking, so we can discuss. But I think that the assumption that somebody is purely one thing is stretching the truth for most of us, maybe all of us.
Well, I have an example there in this way. There was a guy from the UN from headquarters who visited, and he was Hindu, and of course spoke Hindu. And his wife was from Tamil Nadu, and she spoke Tamil. She refused to learn Hindu. He refused to learn Tamil, so they communicated in English.
Right. Yeah, and that's preferred association in south of India, most of it, I think. You know, they don't they saw the northern in Hindu groups as kind of invading their kind of Hinduism and their cultures. So yeah, there's and certainly it appears in Africa that there are you know, groups that hold to themselves, but at the same time, obviously, are learning from the others. Bishop Tutu, when I was teaching with him, you know, would point out to me that, you know, his group wasn't exactly the dominant group, but felt that he had their culture had things special to them that were appropriated by the other South African indigenous peoples and vice versa. So
There's
John,
a,
that's
or I was going to ask of John, maybe as kind of a thought experiment, how would you say that applies to Shinto religion? I mean, I understand it as as a more or less indigenous religion of Japan, and have have they? I know that their festivals, etc., are celebrated by much of the population, but you know, have they accreted maybe things that they've assimilated from other religions in your understanding?
well, both Michinori and George Williams are probably much more able to
Oh,
speak to this
okay.
than I
Okay,
am.
wonderful. Yes,
But
wonderful. Oh, yes, Georgia.
but I'll
I,
put my 2 bits in and then let's get George and Michinori to speak if they will.
yes,
Uh,
yes.
Let
the
Maruta-san speak first because he's such a wonderful friend.
uh,
Okay.
please.
Well, I think that now everything is changing from the Buddhist point of view. So appropriation is a kind of a changing, a phenomenal, you know, changing phenomena. So there's not, you know, no one has anything, owns anything. Everything is shared, should be shared by everyone. That's the thought of Buddhist idea of no ego. So I think that appropriation is one thing, a good thing, but another thing. But what? But I think you know, Shintoism is can change in any way, and Buddhism are also you know, there are 3 or 4 kinds of Buddhism. Although the founder is only one, but there are many, you know, kinds of sects and practices different. That's a preparation in a way. So I think that we have to accept the changing of all kinds of things in all levels. That's my understanding of the principle of impermanence in Buddhism.
Oh,
Good, very good.
thank you.
Hey, can I play devil's advocate?
Okay.
Uh, Local Shinto festivals are owned by the local group and community. And if someone else appropriated it and stole that festival, then there would be a great disturbance. And so even though there would be change in the local community in their festival, they do not want someone else taking it, and festivals are the center of Shinto, said one priest I was reading last night, a newly translated document by a Unitarian minister who is using AI, chat AI, and uh, Deep L to translate Japanese text. And he's doing a marvelous job, something that is
AI is.
really rapid. And then he's getting a local checker, a Pure Land Buddhist priest who does Seiza, which is again, tying back to Imaoka Sensei and Ito-En and a great deal of connections there. But yes, our Buddhist point that there is always change is a word for a little bit of appropriation, I guess.
Yes, I mean, I guess my living experience being in different cultures is that local practices are much very important to the people that do them, and they often are very hesitant about changing them and sometimes sharing them, although I would say my experience with that's very mixed. A lot of times people are very glad to involve other people, but they naturally expect them to participate in the rituals in the way that they are accustomed to them. So you know, I was welcome to go on Jain pilgrimages, for instance, but I was expected to be in the costume they expected and only do the things that a pilgrim was expected to do.
Mhm.
So, I know when my Indian wife and I were Hindu, Jain Indian wife, Hindu Jain Unitarian Indian wife, we were in Iran. You know, she needed to be fully clothed in a way, and so they would throw this whole costume over her that was there for people visiting who outside of their traditions. So, uh, which, you know, was modestly uncomfortable for her, but she was certainly willing to do it to participate in the beauty of the place and the wonder of what was going on in their worship. So I think there's a lot of openness to people doing things as long as they're done respectfully. But of course, I suppose that's always the question. Is it considered respectful enough?
Mm, yeah.
You know, and what's sort of over the line? And that almost gets us back to George Garland's theme today, I would say. You know, because what is what's acceptable, and
Mm. So I have one more question. And it seems to me, particularly thinking about the case of North America, that the farther, like the more different a religion is from the kinds of practices the main, the majority are used to, the harder it is to accept it as actually being a religion and therefore deserving of respect. I mean, if it, I think for a Christian nation, people that go to some kind of building once a week and for their worship time, communal, and and maybe have a sacred book, that's easier to protect and defend than another religion that is just not structured that way at all.
yes, that would certainly be.
And I'm wondering, does that apply in other countries? The same, is that a challenge in other countries?
I think so. I mean, I think that India, of course, where I've had the deepest experience, and I think that's right. I mean, and there, of course, it's because the cultures have such deep roots and are so diverse down to the languages and the literatures that you're not just dealing with the outward symbols, but the Jains of one Jain tradition predominant in one part of the country are quite different than the Jains in a different part of the country. So my Indian wife's ancestry came from. They all wear white clothes. The nuns particularly, where the priests and the monks and nuns in the South Indian tradition would be walking around nude. And that probably would not be accepted if they walked into a temple in Gujarat.
Mhm, mhm.
You know, it wouldn't, that would not be okay. They would probably be expected to put some clothes on. So,
I'm thinking about my country, Jamaica, where we have the religious base of Christianity. We also have the Ethiopian Coptic Church, Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And I remember over my years, Rastafarianism was not seen or respected as a religion, and it surely is now. I mean, we've gone through a generation and a half that has somehow ended up having Rastafarian come into its own.
Mm.
And I'm fascinated because part of that coming into its own is something to do with capitalism and reggae going global. So it's all
I was
rather
going to ask
fascinating
if
to me.
that played a role.
Yes, it did.
The music
Yes.
sold the religion.
Yep. It's fascinating. And
Mhm.
it is.
and there's also class dimensions to that, etc. So how religion can grow and move is something that I really pay attention to.
Absolutely.
I'm reminded of that wonderful man, Leo Edwards, who was a friend of mine from DC, who explained to me when we were trying to get people to participate in celebrations of the United Nations birthday, that rather than us going to them with our theme and explaining how they could participate in our event, you go to the other groups and you ask them what they want to do. What do they want to celebrate? What is their message? And give them a place for them to express that, and you will be loved. And he was so right.
Oh, thank you for lifting him up, George. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's certainly the idea of IRF, and we certainly see it practiced, say, in the congresses where the different people do their worships and the other people participate as they're able with that worship. So I think that's a part of what we're trying to do together. Well, we're not at the end of our time yet, but I want to remind you that these continue each month. And in fact, we're open to other people participating in the future. So if you have something that you'd like to bring up and you would like to participate, we'll certainly consider it. Professor Kunihito Terasawa, who's also a member of our board and is both a evangelical Lutheran and a member of Rishikosa Kai, will be doing our next one, which is on June 19th. So they're all on the third Wednesdays from 4 to 5 Pacific time, because I'm the primary Zoomer. He'll be talking there. I have a feeling that I think he's going to be in Japan at that point. So I think he'll be co-hosting from Japan, but I'm not sure about that. But it should be very interesting. He's a wonderful man, and we're enjoying having him on our board. And then in July, George Garland will be the speaker again, and he's going to be talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and as a safe place for spirituality. So those are the next two coming up, but several people on our screen will be doing one. Stephen Switchaw is going to be doing one later on, and Betsy is going to be doing one later on. So It was delightful to have you all here today. Thank you for being a diverse audience. George, do you have some final things you'd like to, George Garland, that you'd like to share with us as our speaker today?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you all for participating and being part of this meeting, and tell your friends about it. We'd be glad to have more participants in the months to come. And we thank you all for being here. Blessings. Great to see you all. Take care.
Good night.